Hello everybody. Today's guest is Dr. Chris Coy. This was a really fun conversation for me. Dr. Coy is the head of school for Hyde Park Baptist Schools based here in Austin, which is my alma mater. I graduated from Hyde Park in 2004. I got to know Dr. Coy several years ago just through my mom teaching at the school and kind of staying in close proximity to the school post-graduation. I've gotten to know him a little bit outside of a professional lens, which has been really, really nice. In this conversation, we covered a lot of territory. We talked about leadership and the importance of leading young people. We talked about mentorship, the importance of being a mentor and having mentors. We talked about church and school politics. We talked about family struggles, his middle son's childhood cancer diagnosis that he went through. We talked about work-life balance. We talked about faith in the marketplace and whether or not you should share your faith. We just covered a lot of ground here. Really good conversation. This is hopefully not the last time I'll get to talk to Chris. But with that said, hope you enjoy this conversation with Dr. Chris Coy. Kudos to you and to Mike for good leadership there.
Yeah.
That's it's one of the 7 questions I had written down of things I'd want to talk to you about is your ability to lead an organization like Hyde Park Baptist Schools as a relatively young man.
Yeah.
Because your predecessors, most of which I knew, were, for all of the positive qualities, and age is not a positive or a negative, but they were way older men than you.
Right.
What advantages does that give you versus what disadvantages does it present? Or does it present any disadvantages?
Yeah. The Bible's clear about don't get discouraged about your youth. The Bible also talks about there's a lot of wisdom from listening and learning to other people.
Yeah. That's don't let anyone look down on you because you are young.
Correct. So my age, there's pros and cons to it. I specifically remember going to the Capitol to testify on some bills, and when they found out I was an assistant principal, they were like, I can hear them whispering, like, oh, who brought the kid in? Like a lot,
Yeah.
like, that kind of stuff kind of drives you a little bit too, but you just, just keep going. That's why I have a beard. No, just
to
kidding.
give you the legitimacy.
Yeah, just kidding.
Me too.
But I had a lot of examples of what not to do. And there was a lot of older leaders that were horrible. But what a great example. And then there was also a lot of older leaders that were fantastic. And, my age, I've always been a couple of years ahead of the typical path. And that's been very humbling because I remember having as an assistant principal, having a one-on-one, like an observation with a teacher. And she almost taught kids as long as I was alive. And I just kind of started that. I'm like, hey, Miss Watkins, let's just get this thing out there. And I learned enough of what to do, what not to do to make that somewhat comfortable. My deal is like, I'm just here to help. I don't want to tell you what to do. How can I help you? My mom was a math teacher for 36 years, so I was growing up with this respect and reverence for teachers. And, the imposter syndrome started early with me. But
Do you still fight it? Imposter syndrome?
Yes.
Yeah, I have it too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I'm glad someone came up with that term however many years ago. I'm like, okay, yeah, just kind of consider it. And then you kind of dust yourself off and, get some good positive self-talk. But I think that's a good reminder that's out there, but God put me in this position at this time in this place, and it won't last forever, so just the best you can. So you kind of talk yourself kind of out of the, no. Like, someone else saw something in you to put you in this, so
Right.
hang in there, buddy.
Yeah, God has me here for a reason.
That's right.
The anxieties that well up as a result of imposter syndrome are real,
Right.
but it's also because you're self-critical
Right.
and you want to do the job well. You
Yeah.
care about doing the job well. So to not have any even hints of imposter syndrome might be a blind spot. You know,
Correct.
it might mean you've got a little bit of arrogance there that
Yeah.
will cause you to miss things that need to be shored up.
When I make mistakes and when I realize like, oof, I could have done something different, that's when that idea comes to mind, and that's almost like a gauge, like, hey, get back on track, keep thinking, ask more questions. So it's it's almost like a governor to like, of just don't get too cocky, don't do whatever.
Totally. Yeah, I agree with that. For me, maturing the way that I have professionally and the way that the business has in the last 10 years, I've run into that imposter syndrome a lot. What maturing out of it or through it has meant to me is being able to recognize where having that imposter syndrome or just questioning myself constantly is a good thing, but what it looks like when it crosses the threshold into now being debilitating or something that's not serving me or serving the business.
Sure.
And so it's recognizing I'm anxious about something outside of my control. I'm worried about it not going well and having my youth or my inexperience as a CEO be to blame for it.
Yeah.
And I worry too about like things that I'm not seeing or blind spots that I have or waves that are coming that I just don't have the experience because I haven't surfed those big of waves before.
Yeah.
So I worry about those things. I think the solution for that is good mentorship.
I was just thinking about that. Like, I was about to ask you, like, are there men or women 10, 15, 20 years down the road that you could talk to? Because my guess is they'll, even at 55, 60, 65, they still might have imposter syndrome.
Yes. And finding people that care about you as a person and they don't have any financial stake in the game, they don't have any ego tied to your success, knowing that this person cares about me as a human first and that they're going to give me good advice to the best of their ability just because they care about me and they want to see me do well. We wouldn't be here as a business without Steve Vaughn, my uncle, who was a VP of the company that I worked for prior to starting Live Oak. He was awesome. And Francis Fye, who was the CEO of JI Companies. I've known Francis since I was a little boy. They've owned a cabin near our family cabin in southern Colorado for basically since I've been alive. And he built a service business and knows all the nuance of building a company like what we're building. And anytime I have an issue or a problem I've never seen before, I can call Francis. I know I'm going to spend 2 hours on the phone with him because he's going to tell me 5 stories of things that he went through that were almost identical. And here's how we did it this time, and here was the result. And here's how we did it this time, and here's the result. And then knowing, okay, yeah, I've never dealt with these things before, but there's somebody who's at least walked a similar path who will tell me, hey, I don't know that that's the direction you need to go through the woods, but it seems to me like you ought to go that direction.
Yeah.
It's invaluable.
Sure.
We wouldn't be here without that.
Have you started thinking about who you're going to mentor? Are you old enough to do that yet?
It's everybody needs to be a Paul to somebody, and everybody needs to be a Timothy to somebody.
Exactly.
Like you need to be a mentor while you're also developing your mentor relationships. Yeah, I mean a little bit. There's some younger guys in my life that have reached out on occasion just to kind of get my perspective.
Yeah.
I guard their privacy as much as possible because there's things that I have voiced to my mentors that I definitely would not want them talking about publicly.
Sure.
But the path of a young, self-driven, entrepreneurial-minded young man is one of the only things I'm qualified to talk about.
Yeah.
And I do feel a sense of obligation to kind of pass that stuff on where I can. Do you?
Last year I met with 3 Hyde Park graduates.
Oh yeah.
Every week, every Tuesday morning for a year. And a little group was, I named it How Not to Do Your 30s because I was an expert in that.
Yeah.
And so that was our deal. And we went through the Bible, we went through each other's stories. We did spend a lot of time together, but I felt like it was time to invest in those guys, and it was a blast.
Yeah.
It was awesome.
Yeah. And you've stopped doing it now?
Yeah, the deal was let's do this for a year, and then I asked them for them to meet with other guys on their own and just keep multiplying that like that.
Sort of giving them a launch point to go do it themselves.
Yep.
Yeah, that's cool. Will you continue to do stuff like that?
I hope so.
It's weird as a mentor because you're not going to thrust yourself on a mentee.
Right. It is. So you have to have relationships where you want to identify a couple guys that do that. But I hope for the rest of my life that I'm just in and out of men's lives in that kind of way.
Yeah.
Differently than my small group at church, but like intentionally pouring into next generation or just some men that are a couple years before me, those kind of things, because I want to be sitting under older, just like you said, Paul and Timothy.
Right.
Being in the middle. I want to be in the middle as long as I can. I want to be mentored and mentoring as much as possible.
Always, right?
Yep.
Until you die. I have a grandpa who's 92. I've actually talked about him on here a bunch. As mentorship goes, it's speaking for him a little bit, but I think it's kept him young.
Yeah.
Being able to engage with his adult grandson on an adult level and hearing some of the problems that I'm dealing with, both in leading a business and in just leading a family and growing a family.
Yeah.
And I think he's the type that always seeks out knowledge too, so he has lots of mentors and all these things that he's just sort of interested in.
Sure.
And getting to be that sounding board for other people too. Like I would hope that I'm still doing it in my 90s.
I think you'd be good at it.
I hope.
Yesterday I was walking into Summer Moon real quick and walking out, and outside there was two men sitting at a table, and one of the men was probably late 60s, and the other young man looks like a college kid. And they had the Bible out in front of them, and you could just tell what was going on, and it was just so encouraging that for both of them. And that happened yesterday.
Huh.
And I was like, man, good for both of them, but especially that guy could maybe have a tea time, would retire or whatever, but for the older generation to pour into, the younger generation needs the older generation to pour into them.
Right.
Can I get an amen in this deal?
Imagine that, right?
We gotta have it.
Yeah.
You don't ever retire, and I love that you're already there as far as mentoring the next generation.
Yeah.
Really, whatever it is.
I feel a calling towards it. I also feel a affinity for old men. Most of my friend group in Bastrop County are old men. I have a breakfast every Wednesday. I went to it this morning. Yeah, I have a neighbor who's in his 80s, and when we moved to Smithville, we don't know anybody. And so we move into our house. I'm talking to a neighbor that we share a gate with, and I was asking him about breakfast spots.
Yeah.
Where do we go around here for breakfast? Because I moved from Austin. I don't know any places around here, and I like to go have a good breakfast. So he started naming all these places, and he was like, you know what? We'll go have breakfast tacos next week. And we went and we picked a spot. Then he said, okay, I got another spot I want to show you. We went to another spot, and I think the third or fourth week we did it. He said, hey, I've got some buddies of mine that might want to join us. Do you mind? I said, no, that's totally fine.
So you made the ask. He did it.
Yes.
He took that next step of inviting.
Yep. He said, I'd like to invite some of my buddies who are, they're retired guys.
Yeah.
And there's 6 of us now. 7 including me.
Yeah.
I'm the youngest. The second youngest is 74, I think. 75.
You're messing up the average, man.
Yeah. I mean, I bring the average way, way down. My favorite joke, probably the hardest I've made my boys laugh is I've told them about the old man breakfast. That's what I call it. It's what it's saved on my calendar as every week,
Sure.
is old man breakfast. And I was telling them, I've got these older men that I go and I have breakfast with every morning, and it's called the old man breakfast, but they don't call it that. What do they call it, Daddy? And I got real quiet and I said, they call it breakfast. And it's the hardest laugh I've ever gotten from my, at the time, I guess, 8-year-old
That's good.
and 6-year-old boy.
That's good.
Yeah. Yeah, the value of mentorship is very, very high. And to your point, we've kind of forgotten how important that is. There's been so much pushing of the importance of youth and giving the youth a voice. And you forget that 19-year-old has only been on the earth for 19 years.
Right.
They can only know so much
Right.
at that age.
And Tanner, you just listed these folks that you wouldn't be here if it wasn't for,
no question.
right? Same with me. There's a list, but yeah, it's important.
Yeah, it's important to me too. Talk about, with respect to young people. I mean, Hyde Park, your role at Hyde Park is to oversee the formative years of young minds,
Yeah.
both from an education standpoint, giving them some sort of a spiritual scaffolding that will hopefully carry them into adulthood. Tell me the things you're optimistic about that a person who's not in that environment every day
Yeah.
wouldn't know about the next generation of kids. What are you optimistic about?
I'm optimistic about the younger generation are actually craving belonging. They want to be pushed.
They
There's
want to
this-
be pushed.
Oh yeah, they won't tell you that. They have a high sense of like fairness. But regardless of this particular attributes of the next generation, like I believe that young people are young people are young people, and regardless of the generational characteristics, but they are who we got, and that they're who we are supposed to be pouring into. But I'm excited about just their willingness to grow, and it's just cool seeing, because in my business you see kids grow. You see a lot of kids grow, and I'm thinking like a freshman boy to when they become a senior in high school. It's like there's so much opportunity for growth.
It's a different human.
Yeah, this particular generation though, it is different with technology and cell phones and all the things. But yeah, young people are doing more and more good things that, you know, would just blow your mind, like serving and like going around the world and like things that people don't realize. But there's a ton of challenges too.
What is a mature, let's say, young man? What does a mature young man look like today at 15, 16, 17? What are the characteristics that are there?
They go into the football coach and say, I just want to be a part of the team. I just want to play any position. It doesn't matter if I'm the starting quarterback or not. I'll just help the team in any kind of a way. That doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
It's, oh, I've been going to these camps since I've been 5 years old. I'm supposed to be the quarterback and da-da-da. Like, a mature young man looks like a team player, humble, like they get it. It's about bigger than just yourself. And those stick out like a sore thumb, unfortunately, a little bit more than they should.
Yeah.
There's a young man that's coming to mind that is acted that way, and it's just been a positive breath of fresh air.
Yeah. I think you hold up a kid like that as an example, and the characteristics that are there are kind of immutable. They're timeless. It's the same characteristics of somebody from our generation or previous generations.
And how they treat the underclassmen is huge.
Right.
I mean, you hear all about the opposite of that, you know, bullying and that kind of stuff. But what does the opposite look like? Well, man, when they on their own intentionally pour into underclassmen, things like that, that's just a dream.
Yeah. Talk a little bit about the importance of a private school education versus a public school education, or the case that might be made for a public school over a private school.
Yeah.
Is there any of that you think about?
Yeah. Education's important, period, whether it's public or private. There are some awesome educators in both spheres. I've seen them. I've worked in public school. I've worked in private school. In schools are schools, kids are kids. Part of a kid's development, so much of it is what happens at home. How's mom and dad? How are they doing? Specifically, how's dad leading the home? Are they part of a faith community or not? And if they are, to what extent? And then the school. Do they feel like they belong? Is it safe? You know, all those things give a kid a chance to make it. Specifically private and public. Not all private schools are the same. So if you want to talk about private schools, there's a whole diverse set of private schools. Same with public. And so it's, in my experience, it's easy to put schools in just two camps. Not that America ever does like some kind of dichotomy view of anything, but you know, of course, in general, private schools have a lot more freedom to do what makes sense for their kiddos. They don't take in the state's money, so then they have to follow the rules.
Yeah.
Now, school choice might change that. If private schools do take state money, it'll be interesting to see what rules they have to follow or not follow.
Yeah, how would that work?
Well, there's plenty of states that can answer that question outside of Texas that have had school choice. I talked to I had a school in Iowa for a long time about what that looks like, and my joke is I'm just going to raise tuition the amount of the voucher. Just kidding. I'm not going to do that. But the school choice voucher thing, that's a whole separate conversation, back to public and private.
Is that actively in consideration in Texas, school choice?
Yeah, the governor has made that a priority for a couple sessions. It'll come back up again. He had a special session a couple times to try to get it passed. It didn't pass, but that keeps coming up a lot.
It stays on the docket.
Yeah. The Republican National Convention this week, school choice has come up from a couple of the speakers, things like that. But private schools are changing too. Private schools are changing. Again, not all private schools are the same as public schools are changing. So there are two big camps. I love being able to do what I feel like is best for my kids and my parents. Comes with the cost, but our particular school, we're so much more than just a traditional school about reading and writing and arithmetic. We prepare kids for college, and that's a huge part of what we do. We also provide them with the truth that the way of Jesus is better than the way of the world. And we'll get criticized for that, but Bob Ed Shotwell started Hyde Park in 1968, and my job is just to continue what he started 56 years ago, and try not to mess it up too bad.
Yeah. You have a real unique challenge too, because to your point about not all private schools being created equal, I went to private schools, only went to private schools. I think we've talked about this before in last coffee conversations, but I went to a very small private school in the Austin area from pre-K until mid-year, my sophomore year, and then had an opportunity to go to Hyde Park. And for where I was at the time, I'm a 15-year-old kid. I've gone to the same school my entire life. My mom taught there. I knew where all the levers were to just get by. You know what I mean?
Sure.
You know all the people. You know what bare minimum looks like, and I could just skate. And then going to Hyde Park, man, I'll never forget going to take my shadowing day and seeing the people that were my age that just felt put together to me, and realizing, like, I don't know anybody here. I don't know how the process works at the school. I felt a sense at that point that I had this decision to make, and if all other criteria were equal, well, one of these things makes me nervous and the other one doesn't, to stay or to go.
Sure.
Well, I only ever knew that school, and going over here makes me nervous. So it's the first time in my life I made a decision based on that criteria. What's the thing that makes me the least comfortable? Let's go do that thing. And not to overstate it, I don't think I am where I am if I don't make the choice to go to Hyde Park at that time. And that's not to disparage the school that I came from. I'm sure that if you took a kid and you put him or her through that school under different circumstances where they weren't there forever and they didn't know all the teachers and administrators, it's probably different. But I do know that when I got to Hyde Park, there were 66 kids in my class, most of which took themselves pretty seriously. And of those 66 kids, we really didn't have a whole lot of cliques. There wasn't a lot of division in our grade. We all got along pretty well with each other. There was this level of expectation that I noticed distinctly when I got to Hyde Park. Like, you don't come to school here and skate by. These people take themselves a little bit more seriously. And man, just looking at the comparison between my grade at the other school I was at versus my grade at Hyde Park, and seeing what kids in my grade at the other school did post-school, and then seeing what kids in my grade at Hyde Park did, it's not comparable. And what is that? What is it about a certain kind of private school education that can actually hinder a kid post-high school? Yeah,
schools are people. So the people that are creating that culture, whatever school you're talking about, is what has the biggest influence on the students' success. For example, at Hyde Park at that time, you feel like you had high expectations. That's because some people in that school built that culture and you benefited from it. And I'm grateful that Hyde Park has had that reputation for a long time of being a good school, academically, things like that. The high expectations. Also, parents probably have a big, high expectation too, especially if they're paying. It's like, golly, I can have you slack off for free in public school. Like, I'm paying this tuition, like, let's go. But even the last 20 years, there's been evolution of private schools picking it up academically, because there's also this flavor of really nice people that love the Lord, but professionally, they're not the world-class educators, but it's okay because they're so sweet and so nice. Like, when I came to Hyde Park, after going to public school for 3 years and master's degree and all this other training, I'm like, okay, time out. Let's do both. Let's have high character, great, sweet people, but also are as committed professionally as anyone else around. Let's have both. And when private schools get that, then they're unstoppable.
Yeah.
Then you have the best teachers in the city, the best coaches in the city, the best administrators that have huge, high expectations academically and can relate and help you grow spiritually too. Like, you can't compete with that in any other school.
And those things are not mutually exclusive.
Correct.
You don't have to choose, do I
Nope.
pursue this for the kids or do I pursue this for the kids?
That's right.
I actually think too, Paul and I were talking before you got here about our generation, my generation being millennials, might be the first generation since the Great Depression era who don't necessarily want an easier life for their kids. I don't want an easier life for my boys.
Yeah.
I want them to be challenged. I want them to have to go through adversity. I want them to learn to be tough and resilient and maintain character through tough times. And like, I want that in microcosms for them. I don't want them to just get bludgeoned by life. But going into a place that has high expectations, I think that that's been frowned upon for a while. And then there's just been this shift now where somebody like a Jordan Peterson comes out of nowhere, explodes in popularity, and by all measures is still exploding in popularity. Yet his message is, clean your room up, stand up straight with your shoulders back, like work harder than anybody else is willing to work, and all these things that used to be common knowledge but just sort of had kind of fallen by the wayside. It's one of the reasons why I think he's so popular with men.
Yeah.
Because I think men are built to carry a load, and they're not as sorted out if they're not pushing themselves in that way.
Yeah.
That's why you have depression exploding in a male population. Because if you're not pushing yourself and testing your limits and carrying more weight than just you bear, like bearing other people's weights for them, this doesn't work as well.
Right.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Back to what I'm excited about for you, like back to kids wanting to be pushed. There's just something inside of us that, like, when we know when we're not giving our best or being lazy, you just feel like we actually want the high expectations because it feels good to accomplish something you didn't feel like you could on your own, and you got pushed, and you see those kind of things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then you get that sense of wonder too, of like, well, I did that, and it was really hard, but I did it.
Yeah. Why do I have to take calculus?
Yeah.
It's not about the math. It's about you did something really, really hard and you push yourself.
Right.
Because guess what? When you graduate, walk across the stage,
what else are you capable of?
Exactly.
If you can do those things.
That's right.
Yeah, those sort of meta skills build on themselves and benefit you in life.
You mentioned the millennials. You said your generation. I'm going to say yours because I'm a few years older, and I'm going to claim.
How old are you?
I don't know. I'll be 43 in September. So I'm not Gen X, but I'm not millennial. I'm like, there's like a 3-year period between, whatever that's called, Zennial or something. But I haven't found millennial parents to want a harder life. Didn't you just say that?
Yeah. I probably shouldn't speak for a whole
I
generation.
found, well, but I bet you the Vaughn family, you do.
Yeah.
But in my experience, it's been the opposite as far as parents like being too protective. Being too protective, not letting them fail. And now finally there's research out there that how challenging it is when we don't let our kids fail, when we come in and swoop and save them. And say, okay, fine, you barely passed. You would have learned so much more with a 68 than a 70, but Mommy came and saved you, and so we're good.
Yeah.
No, failing forward is a thing. And more research is coming out supporting, we gotta let them fail a little bit. We gotta let,
when the consequences are small.
That's right, let them make as many mistakes as possible underneath our roof. But it's a challenge though. The whole phone thing, it's like, there's you can make a case for, should we really track them every step of the way? But when you have families like yourself that have a balance of like, we're not going to overdo it, but we're also not going to, then you see those kids thrive.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm like, I'm so glad we didn't have cell phones when we were kids.
Yeah,
we're tracked every way.
My life would have been so much different if there were cell phones. If the iPhone existed when I was in college, I guess it came out late college for me. Boy,
right.
I would have made bad decisions.
Would your parents have tracked you? Would you
No.
have those?
No, my parents wouldn't have. It's I've talked about this with my siblings a bunch, about just sort of the weird cocktail of my two parents together and what that resulted in their kids. There was just enough. My parents weren't laissez-faire at all. Like they wanted us to take things seriously.
Yeah.
They wanted us to be competitive, but they did let us fail. And they were okay with letting us fail when the consequences were small.
Yeah.
And some of that dynamic led us to recognize the responsibility that we had for our own outcomes at a very, very early age.
Sure.
And also who to trust and not trust. I don't know what my parents did right when we were young that led to this sort of awareness of not everybody's looking out for my best interest.
Sure.
I share that trait in common with my brother and my sister. We can recognize when somebody's real and when they're not.
That level of discernment is helpful.
Kind of an important skill set. You have a family?
I do.
How many kids do you have?
Today, 3 boys.
3 boys.
9, 11, 7.
Okay. So
I don't know why I went in that order. 11, 9, and 7. We'll do it like that.
you like the 9-year-old most. You mentioned him first. Then the 11-year-old.
I knew I had a 9-year-old and I had time to
start with the one that you know and then fill in the blanks.
Yeah, so rising 6th, 4th, and 2nd.
Yeah,
Right.
so talk to me about raising boys, because that is something I know a little bit about, and the complexity of balancing your time between dad, husband, and head of school for a big private school system.
Yeah.
The hours you put into one are mutually exclusive with the other. How do you weigh that? How do you balance it?
3 rehearsal dinners is cheaper than 1 wedding.
Definitely.
That's all my buddies with all girls. I'll get that out of the way.
Definitely.
I'm married to a super mom. Heather is a paramedic, City of Austin, Travis County. So we have 911 in the house. Real adventurous, a 7 on the Enneagram. She's awesome. Paramedics work 24 on, 72 off. And so for years and years and years, I had 1 kid by myself a couple days a week. And then I had 2 kids by myself a couple days a week, and then 3. So for example, if Heather was working on 24-hour shift on a Saturday, it's me and the 3 boys. So I was very fortunate I was thrown into, okay, Dad, figure it out.
Forced.
And I remember, okay, 1, it's one thing. 2, I remember when the 3rd one came, it hit me. I'm like, wait, you're going back to work? Totally outnumbered. It was terrifying, but you figure it out.
Yeah.
So I had this special time. She doesn't have that schedule anymore, but I was a single dad. I was at the Saturday at 10 a.m. 3-year-old birthday party, carrying one and chasing another, and me and all the moms at the birthday party. So I had that really special time to do that. I I didn't do great about balancing the work-life balance deal, though. So I had that kind of just built in. But when I was at home, it was difficult for me to be at home. In the summertime, it was difficult for me to be present. In the summertime, we had a break, things like that. And unfortunately, I prioritized leadership and my job, and something was off. And I was striving. And to be honest, I couldn't wait to go back to work. I'm not sure what that's all about, but I know it wasn't healthy. And so that was difficult. Thankfully, it's not that way anymore.
Why?
The 9-year-old got pretty sick a couple years ago, and so that was a good humbling kind of wake-up call. Dylan got diagnosed with acute lymphoblastic leukemia on July 9th, 2020. So that was a wake-up call as far as setting priorities.
July 9th of 2020.
That's right.
So you get hit with pandemic locking the world down, and then 3 months later, leukemia diagnosis.
Yeah, Heather texted me, I think Dylan has cancer.
Oh my gosh.
That's not a good text.
Yeah, what's that text like?
It was
Where were you when it happened?
in my house, and okay. It was I'm going to call her back. And that's when the nightmare started. But brother-in-law comes over. I'm like, hey, Tyler, the youngest, Daddy needs to go to the hospital. So then it was just off the races, driving to Dale Children's. But yeah, that was a humbling time. And that's a whole nother hour-long story. But Dylan responded well to treatment, and he's cancer-free, praise God. And I got to, for 9 days, we're in the hospital. We didn't go home. I was actually able to rest and be present in a way I never have. No emails, no work, none of the responsibilities. We have people taking everything. COVID, there was nobody in the hospital hardly, unless you needed to be there. So it was just me, Heather, Dylan, some nurses. So for 9 days, I got to be still.
Be still.
And that was very helpful. Isaiah 30:15 says, and rest and repentance is your salvation, and quietness and trust is your strength. And that verse was very relevant for that time. And for the first time, I got to experience rest. And then I was able to experience God's presence because I was so still, of course, praying and reading the Word and like praying for Dylan to get, I just was so humbling, right? That's where you go, right, in those times. But when you experience God's presence, the Bible says you'll experience not just joy, but fullness of joy. So ask me how to go from cancer to joy, I can tell you.
Yeah.
And so that was a life-changing moment. And then fast forward a couple years, Dylan's doing great. Finally, I realized that prioritizing leadership over love has a cost. I went to school for leadership, read the books, the podcasts, all the kind of things, and it's really important. I'll continue to do those things, but there's a cost if you're just focused on leadership. And part of the cost is yourself. How are you leading yourself? So finally, I'm realizing like, okay, there's a cost to being a principal at 33. There's a cost to being a head of school at 40. Okay, great. You better get some good rhythms because this is not sustainable. Your pace, all the things, right? And so for the last couple of years, I've been learning and been curious about healthy rhythms. Because I would like to do this for a while. And I'm not going to with a certain pace and with a certain schedule.
Not at
with
the
certain
expense
rhythms.
of your family.
That's correct.
Yeah.
And now I'm able to be home and be present with my kids because, to be honest, Tanner, after you get cancer, work isn't as important.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah.
You would never wish for or think positively on a child getting cancer, but is there a point at which you think that you look at that as a positive thing that happened in your life? Or is it too soon to look at it through that lens?
I've been thinking about it as a positive almost since it happened.
Really?
Yeah.
In the moment, you recognize this is...
9 days, the fourth floor of the north side of Del Children's Hospital, I was realizing there's a purpose here. And the Bible is clear about the bad things are going to happen. And here's how you can expect for it to go after that. Bad things are going to happen. Jesus says, take heart, I've overcome the world. But, bad things are going to happen. In this world you have trouble, he said. Okay, great.
But do not be dismayed.
But I got you.
Yeah.
I have come to overcome the world. In Romans 5, it's like, suffering produces some things. Character, hope, perseverance, things like that. The Bible keeps talking about bad stuff's going to happen. But, so then when you're in that situation, you get to actually apply it. And shocker, God's word is true. And I grew because of it. I got closer to God because of it. And one day I'll sit down and talk to Dylan about that horrible summer he had before kindergarten and tell him how his dad grew from his suffering.
Is he old enough now for you to talk to him about the failures that you recognized in yourself at that time?
No. I don't think so. But I can't wait to talk about that at some point with him when he's old enough to understand it.
Yeah.
But
I feel like those are important conversations.
no doubt.
For a parent to have with a kid, but especially a man to have with his son.
That's right.
Because a kid always looks at his dad as the hero. He's always the superhero.
That's right.
But to prepare that kid for what life is inevitably going to deal him,
That's right.
you'd want him to know the stories of when you failed and recognized it and course corrected, and here's the lesson that it taught me.
That's right.
Yeah, I've got some of that too.
Yeah.
There's a for me, the tension between the time spent as CEO, the time spent as husband and father, because they're mutually exclusive, and because the requirements ebb and flow. Sometimes there's things at Live Oak that require more time of me, and it's going to be at the expense of my family, and it requires me and Ashton to have to be on the same page about importance of time. But it's difficult because you're constantly having to monitor yourself. You're having to be really honest about where you failed and acknowledge, okay, I've spent too much time at home. Like we're coming off of basically a month of vacations. Okay, I've spent too much time there. Now I need to acknowledge that failure,
Yeah.
course correct, and then still monitor myself to make sure I don't go too far this direction. And it's that constant monitoring and living in the tension between the two
Yeah.
that makes it so difficult.
Well, luckily life slows down for you for like a month for you to get it all figured out.
Yeah.
So you have like this time
And it's
out,
predictable when it slows
time
down.
out when you can do it. Yeah, I think what you're talking about, and I think you do a good job of this, is just being intentional with your time. And that word intentional, I keep going back to it. It's like, I mean, do you have next week scheduled out or not, and all the things, but
Yeah.
working backwards from what's most important. And God, I'm still learning how to do all that, especially a relationship with Heather, my boys. She does a way better job. She schedules like date days with the kids and things like that. And leadership has a cost.
Yeah.
In your position, it just has a cost as far as time, but it's not quality time. It's quality and quantity.
Right.
It's
Yes.
both.
Yeah,
And
it's
I'm still learning how to
quantity
figure
of
it out.
time to allow for you to also do the dishes at the end of the day, because that stuff matters too, even if it's not quality time you're spending.
And you need to do the dishes right.
Right. Yeah.
Just kidding. Sorry,
Yeah.
Joe.
Yeah. I agree with that.
Everyone tells me you got to take advantage of the summertime, like and other head of schools, things like that, because that is the break. And we just got done with a 21-day RV trip to Yellowstone National Park.
Wow. What's that like?
It's expensive. No, because I'm not a handyman. I can't fix the stuff that breaks. I've never had a trip like that. I didn't grow up camping and RVing and those kind of things. I was all like sports. But we're just trying to capture the kids when they're. That's what Heather wanted to do. Just capture the kids, not do it all over the place. It was an epic trip, 3,300 miles there and back.
Wow.
And just hours and hours and hours to think. Heather's right there. We get to talk finally. Kids are in the back, at least for a few moments, iPad, headphones, like, okay, cool, we can actually have a conversation.
Yeah.
It was great. It was awesome. I'm very, very grateful and fortunate we had that time to do that.
Yeah, you have to do that stuff on purpose.
Correct.
It doesn't happen accidentally.
No.
But if you make time to plan it out to the extent that you can, to plan it out, to give you a framework to spend that time
Yeah.
with your family.
Yeah.
It's like in real time, I'm making memories for these kids that are akin to the memories that I have doing something similar.
Mm-hmm.
But you also recognize all the times when you didn't do that, or you prioritized,
Yeah.
business stuff over
Yeah.
family stuff. That's a recognition of failures. When the failures are small, it happens as
Sure.
a dad too.
Sure.
Yeah. Talk about. There have been several times in my professional life where I have done business with a company that publicly proclaimed the faith of their founder as like a part of their marketing materials, Christian-owned business. And in not every case, but in some of those cases, it's the worst, most unethical business practices displayed there that I have seen. Do you run into that at all? Do you see any of that?
I mean, yeah, I'm a hypocrite.
Yeah.
Look at me. I run a Christian school and I fail and mess up all the time.
All have sinned.
Correct.
Yeah.
So to say no, I haven't, probably isn't honest.
Yeah.
I'm fortunate that I've got a lot of head of school friends that are just rock stars, are awesome. But hypocrisy, yeah, I've seen that. And I just need to look in the mirror. And that's where I see it first,
Yeah.
to be honest.
In your business, it's different because your business partially includes the mission statement to give kids a spiritual framework, right? Should a business with a business owner who's a Christian use that as a marketing tool? How does that strike you? Does that question make sense?
Are you saying should they kind of sell the fact that they're a Christian company?
What place does it have in the way that they run their business to mention their faith or not mention their faith? How appropriate is it for a Christian-owned business to market themselves as such?
Gotcha.
Maybe it's because that's what's the most important thing to that person.
Yeah.
But it's also in some circumstances
Yeah.
meant to be a marketing tactic.
Yeah. I'm not really sure, Tanner. I think that if you're selling a product or service, I think Christians should sell that product and service because of what that product and service is.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're a believer, then that should influence how you sell your product or service, but you're not necessarily selling a faith or Christianity unless you're like a pastor. But if you're selling a secular good or service, you really set yourself up for, oh, okay, so you're selling me a widget. This is a Christian widget?
Right.
I mean, probably in 2024, you should probably, how about you sell your faith through how you do business, not what you sell?
Yeah.
That's what I would answer that question.
Instinctively, I agree with you. Because I've seen the other be true, where you do business with a company and it seems pretty obvious that they're doing things unethically, and yet the faith basis of the principles is like the leading charge. They put things on their trucks and it seems to me like the best way to minister to your community, given your faith, is to do an exceptionally good job at whatever it is that you do and let that be the thing that speaks for you.
Yeah, work for the Lord with all your heart, not for man. Like just, you set yourself up for, being a lot of criticism, which is fine, but like, just sell the widget in a Christian loving way.
Right. Yeah. Do it in the best, most Christ-like way possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I have one more question. We talked a lot about leadership stuff.
Yeah.
What are the timeless characteristics of good leadership? What does a good leader look like to you?
Yeah, Maxwell would say it's influence, but man, a good leader leads him or herself. That's where I'm at now with leadership. Like, lead yourself. There's an inseparable link between yourself as a person, your character, and your leadership. So I can give you the 7 habits of highly effective people. I can give you the 21 irrefutable laws of leadership. But you're giving away who you are as a leader. Social intelligence, emotional intelligence, all those kind of things. So that's where I was like, you gotta lead yourself. Big deal is you gotta have a vision. Where are we going? You gotta have a vision. You gotta have a vision, right? And you have to have clear, direct communication, which means it needs to be more uncomfortable not having the conversation than having it. And once you get to that point where you're actually looking forward to, in a healthy way, having that crucial conversation, because you know that's what leaders do, and they talk directly to people in a loving, kind way. Once you get to the point where that doesn't scare you anymore, then you can actually lead someone. But if you're like, I just hope it goes away, and you're passive aggressive, and you know that kind of stuff, that's not good.
Yeah. Being willing to have the uncomfortable conversation for the other person's benefit.
Correct.
Yeah.
Which means you have to be secure enough in yourself to do that. Again, let's go back to yourself. But having a vision, leaders have to work together as a team. If you think this is just your deal, good luck with that, especially these days. Leaders have to be able to bring a team together. One of my favorite sayings, everything's a group project. Not everyone loves that, but like that's just how I roll. Everything's a group project. And I'm gonna ask anybody. I'll ask the janitor or the CFO their opinion about something. It doesn't matter. But yeah, you gotta lead yourself, because people can see right through that.
Yeah.
Integrity, honesty, those kind of things. But that just comes from who you are. But if you don't genuinely care about the other person, I'm not even using the word love, even though that's the best. That's level 5. Like genuinely loving, genuinely wanting the most, getting the most out of it, like for them. You're gonna have a lid, right? And I think Tanner genuinely cares about Live Oak employees, would be my guess. Genuinely. Not just because that's what CEOs are supposed to do for the company. And if you don't have that, for whatever reason, you're going to be limited as a leader.
Yeah. I think people have a gene deep down where they can tell if somebody's looking out for their best interest or not, or whether somebody's telling you the truth or not. I talked to a guy yesterday about this with respect to Joe Rogan, that I think that's one of the things that makes him so popular, is that people listen to him talk, and whether you agree with him or not, at least you can recognize that I think that guy's telling the truth. At least from the data that he's gathered, he's telling me what he thinks is probably the truth about it. So yeah, I think people have that gene in them, and you can't lead somebody if they just think intuitively, that guy's kind of out for himself.
Yeah, and you can't, back to leadership also is, are you comfortable not telling the whole story because you just can't? Because you can't air out every single detail to explain yourself. Can you keep your mouth shut and just wear it, because that's the right thing to do, and that's the professional thing to do. And you're never going to be able to explain yourself to every single person about the decisions you made, because you're in the leadership position. That's not what you do. If you can't stand that, then don't do that.
Yeah.
But do you have the security, secure enough to be like, I understand we're going to disagree, and understand that I can't tell you the whole story because of obvious reasons, confidentiality, whatever, and I can still sleep at night. If you can't do that, it's going to drive you crazy.
That's great. That's a mature perspective. I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I said that was the last question, but I got one more.
Yes,
You
sir.
talked about vision. So talk about the vision for Hyde Park Baptist Schools. Where are you today? What's the school going to look like 3 years from now?
Yeah.
What's important to you? Talk about that a little bit, if you would.
We want to create a place where kids can grow. The vision for Hyde Park is we want to create good soil for our kids to grow. We want them to meet, know, and follow Jesus, we want to have 175, 200 adults create this soil where, regardless of where you start, that you're going to be prepared for college, but you're also going to be provided with the truth that the way of Jesus is better than the way of the world, and you'll be equipped to go in the world and make a difference. The vision is also to maintain what Bob Ed Shotwell started 57 years ago. That's hard to do. There's this pull to progress and evolve, if you will, so to speak, with some things. And the vision is to be the same school in some aspects that we were, with learning as kids are learning. Kids are different, those kind of things. So the vision is to create good soil, and it's very difficult to do, but what a difficult but challenging and fulfilling and worthwhile way to be in the trenches with kids and parents and be like, we're going to love you, we're going to serve you, we're going to teach you, we're going to coach you, and we can't wait to see what God does with you as you continue to grow.
Yeah.
And we're going to tell you the truth in love.
My generation was taught that you should be happy in your job, like that's the thing to aspire to. I don't agree with that. I think that you should aspire to be fulfilled by what you're doing professionally.
Yeah.
To find meaning in what you're doing.
Yeah.
It's not hard for you to find meaning in what you're doing, because you're raising kids that will someday be adults and someday lead. And
yes,
what more important thing could you be spending your time doing?
There's a lot of purpose and joy going to work every day.
Yeah. Thanks for taking time to do this. I do appreciate it.
Thank you, Tanner.
That was a full hour. It went by quick.
Yeah, it did.
Maybe we can do it again.
For sure.
Appreciate you, man.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.